Hey guys, Alex here from the DMs Club on the Titan Bear Gaming YouTube channel. Welcome to Dungeon Mastery 101, where I teach you how to become a Dungeon Master. Maybe you're a player that's been playing for a while who just wants to try on the role of being Dungeon Master and see what things feel like from the other side of the table. Or maybe you're a part of a new group of players where somebody needed to volunteer to be the Dungeon Master, and you volunteered for the job. If that's you, good on you. Learning how to Dungeon Master can seem like an imposing thing. It can seem like there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to pick up. It can seem like an arcane craft that how did anybody ever figure out how to do this successfully? And the good news is that it's actually a lot simpler than it seems outwardly. You might be playing with your own Dungeon Master and see how they run their table, or you might be watching shows like Critical Role or Maze Arcana and watch these DMs and think to yourself, man, they do a great job, I'm not sure I could ever do that. Anybody can Dungeon Master with a little bit of guidance, and that's what I'm here to provide. There are a lot of resources that already exist for helping you to improve your Dungeon Master game, but in my experience, there's not too many that help you start at step one. When you make the decision that you want to learn how to be a DM, that you want to actually do being a Dungeon Master and running a table of your own, how do you go from that all the way to running your very first couple of sessions? That's what I aim to provide with this series of videos. I want to equip you with enough knowledge to run your own table. I want to give you an understanding of the roles that you're going to play as a Dungeon Master and why you play those roles, what the value is of those roles, and how you play those roles, as well as giving you enough technical knowledge to execute your table successfully. Now, as the Dungeon Master, you are fundamentally different from the other players at the table. All the rest of the players are going to be making an adventurer that they're going to play, and that they're going to be playing the role of that character as that character makes decisions and says things and does things in the game as the story unfolds in front of them. But you are the one who unfolds that story in front of them, and so you are kind of singular in that point of view. You have a few roles that you need to understand that you play as the Dungeon Master for a table. The first one is the most important one, in my opinion, and that is you are the table host. You are the one who is inviting people to come to your house or to go to wherever you're going to be playing to come and actually participate in this hobby every week or every 2 weeks or however often you're going to be meeting. You're the one issuing those invitations. You're going to be asking people to play. You're going to be helping them make characters. You're the one who's going to be overseeing whether or not they're having fun in the activity and whether or not you're having fun in the activity. The overall success of the table rests on you and your decisions, how you run your table, being able to make this a good and satisfying game that people are going to want to come back to every time that you ask them to play. You also play the role of lead storyteller. It's true that your characters are all going to be playing their own characters. They make their own decisions. They choose what actions their characters are taking, what kinds of things their characters want to say, but they're all doing that within the context of the overarching story that you are providing to them. That makes you the lead storyteller. You are the one defining what the world around them looks like, what kind of villainous plots are going to be taking place in that world, who needs saving, what kinds of things are happening in each of the towns, what is the farmer over there doing. You are the one who's ultimately deciding what each of these things are, and you are telling that story for your players. Your players play roles in that story, but you play the overarching story. You also play the role of the lead rules official. It is up to you to know what the rules are, to know how to play the game, and to arbitrate and interpret the rules when there seems to be something that doesn't necessarily make sense. It's a complex game. You're basically simulating an entire other world as it's happening in your storytelling environment, and so you're going to find things where two rules may not necessarily make sense with one another, and it is your responsibility. You have the authority to decide which of those rules is going to take precedent or how this should be run at your table. If something doesn't make sense to you, or if you don't like the way that something looks, you have the power. You are explicitly granted that power by the creators of Dungeons & Dragons to throw out rules sections and do things your own way. That is a part of the authority that is given to you as Dungeon Master. You get to decide what's fun. You get to decide what kinds of things need to happen at your game table in order for people to have the most fun. Now, if you're hearing me describe each of these roles and you're thinking to yourself, man, that's a lot of power or a lot of authority, a lot of responsibility for one person. It's true, it is. But that's where the first role of being table host is the most significant thing. It's the most important thing. Your players are only going to want to do this activity with you. You will only have a table to run as a dungeon master if you've got players and if your players want to be doing this. And it's ultimately up to you to decide over the course of your own actions and decisions that you take how successful your game is going to be. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you understand what the best things to do, the best practices to help cultivate the most exciting and enjoyable experience possible at your game table. This is a good time for us to talk about the spirit of dungeon mastery. What is the attitude that you should be embodying as you take actions and make decisions of being a dungeon master as you get started with this journey? And I like to call this the DM trust agreement. And it basically boils down to the following. As the Dungeon Master, you are going to be creating a world and writing a story, telling a story for your players that your players then take actions in and play their roles in the plots and timelines that you provide in front of them. But you are providing that in front of them, which means you are the world, you are the adversaries, you are the enemies, you are the villains, you are monsters, you are traps that are laid to be there as a danger to your players. You are going to be writing things that are explicitly harmful to your players. You are going to be setting difficulty levels for if a players want to try to do something in the world. You're going to be picking the number that a character needs to roll on their dice to determine whether or not they're successful at something. This could be a difficult thing to balance. How do you manage this? How do you run a table while being the opposition? You are going to be opposing the player characters. And it's a common pitfall for new dungeon masters to fall into, where they decide to draw a line in the sand, or on the table as it is, to where the players, if the players are losing, if you kill your players, or if the players come out of the day feeling miserable that you've won. No, this is terrible. That's an easy recipe for making it so that your players never come back. Don't go into that. You need to remember that you balance this equation by also being the allies for your party, by being magic items that you are giving the players and putting at their disposal so that they can become more powerful. And at its very basest, you give the party experience. You give the characters experience points so that they can level up and they can become more powerful in their own right and take on higher sets of abilities and become more capable adventurers. You play the role of both of them, the bad and the good, and you have to do this as a balancing act. But how do you do so? This is where my first suggestion comes in. Be the biggest fan of the player characters. Celebrate their triumphs and lament their despair with them. Anytime that something bad happens, grimace and wince and, oh yeah, that's really terrible. And celebrate the really good stuff that happens so that way you can appreciate the good, you can appreciate the bad, and that way you, being the person who's setting both in front of them, can arbitrate between the two successfully. Good drama comes from encouraging tension in your story. Now, tension does come from opposition, but tension also comes from having the characters and the players of those characters feel like the decisions that they make have value, that they have consequence, that the things that they choose to do in the game matter. You want to try to cultivate this concept of appropriately difficult. That's what's going to make something memorable, is when a player feels like something was hard enough that they had to work for it, that they had to work to overcome something, but it wasn't too hard that it felt like they were just being crushed, and it wasn't easy. If things are just easy all the time, nobody is interested in doing it. It's a boring thing to be doing. Appropriately difficult is the brain space and is the attitude that you want to try to cultivate as you go forward as a dungeon master. So I think that's about good for an introduction. I think I'll go ahead and call this video here. I have a number of topics that I definitely want to cover in this series as I go forward, starting with a step-by-step guide. What are all of the practical steps that you need to take to go from today, deciding that you want to be a dungeon master, to actually being a dungeon master and running your first couple of game sessions? What do you need to do to get ready for that? And what do you need to know in order to actually make that happen? I'm going to cover a rules primer. There's a whole bunch of rules that exist for this game, but you don't need to know all of them to get started. In fact, you only need to know a subset of them to practically run a game session successfully. The rest of them you can learn as you practice and as you go forward. You'll learn them over time. I also want to cover planning, story planning. How do you plan for a campaign? How do you plan for an individual session that you're going to play? How do you plan an encounter that's going to happen within that individual session? Which monsters do you use? How many of them do you use? Do you use this dastardly CR rating system that exists within the book, or do you not use them? What kinds of loot, what kind of rewards are you going to be giving to your players? All of these things we'll talk about. How do you plan the content that your players are going to play through? I also want to talk about, from a narrative perspective, how do you tell a story within this game? And it does come out in terms of planning and it does come out in terms of execution, but it is different from writing a novel. Writing for a role-playing game is not the same as writing a short story. We'll talk about why. So the next video that we're going to do is going to be Dungeon Mastery 102. Start at the beginning. It's a rational place to start, right? So go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you can make sure that you get the notification for when those go out. Subbing also helps us out a lot right now. If you can help us get our sub count up, that's really helpful. YouTube has a number of things mechanically that they don't let us have access to until we reach minimum sub requirements. So you helping us reaching our sub count actually goes a long way for helping us make this channel better. In the meantime, you can also check out some of my other DMs Club videos. I made a couple about what is Dungeons & Dragons and making a character for D&D. And if you're one of those players that is just getting started and has never touched a role-playing game before, go check those out. Those are a pretty good introduction to get started with role-playing games in general. You can also go watch other Dungeon Masters do their craft. You can go to twitch.tv and look at the D&D channel and watch any of their week-long retinue of shows that they've got there. There's a bunch of really great Dungeon Masters who are really good at what they do. They present different styles, different creativity techniques. They're all really good. The best way to learn the pacing and the feel of how to be a Dungeon Master is to watch other people being Dungeon Masters. So go ahead and do that. I think that about does it. Look forward to the next video. Until then, have more fun, would you? It's good for you.